I hope my slides are visible, right?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
So, once again, good afternoon, everyone. So, today we are starting this our first module. So, in last two lecture, we basically discussed the background of this course, and we tried to introduce this course and the importance. So, if we try to recapitulate the last class, so where we have seen what is the present market capitalization of the semiconductor compared to other industries. Followed by that, we try to understand the different manufacturing categories of your semiconductor industry. Then this semiconductor industry can be divided into two parts based on the material. One is silicon based manufacturing unit, that is fab. So another one is non-silicon based, primarily for emerging application. And following that, we have also seen what are the different steps involved in case of silicon fab, as well as in case of compound semiconductor, such as gallium nitride fab. So again, we have seen different devices. Like we have tried to understand the evolution of different semiconductor devices as well as the semiconductor technology. Because obviously, to realize any device concept, we need some process technology. So these are something we have seen in our last introductory class. So from today onwards, we'll start with this module one. That is our first module on semiconductor electronics. So here the first part of this semiconductor electronics, which we'll try to cover today, it is basically on the physics of semiconductor material. Again, I believe from your class 12 or class 10 plus 2 knowledge, and from your these other courses like IC 161, you have some understanding. Obviously we'll look into the details of this semiconductor as a material. So now, so this is the outline that we are going to follow. So anyway, this is just I am following the syllabus we have for our first module. So first we'll try to understand this basic physics of this material, and then the band model of solid, and of course so we'll try to understand why this is important and what is this. So then we'll see this carrier distribution functions. Then we'll try to quantify the free carriers, which are that either electron or holes in case of semiconductor. So followed by that, we'll try to understand the different operating conditions of semiconductor devices, such as equilibrium and non-equilibrium. So in non-equilibrium, there are two states which are essentially your transient condition as well as steady state condition. So we'll look into all this, and finally we'll see the different current conduction mechanism we have in case of semiconductor, or eventually in our semiconductor device. So now this is another, I think, a very interesting slide. So as we know, in terms of conductivity, we can broadly categorize our material uh, as metal, semiconductor, and insulator. So now, if we, so this schematic actually representation of this is a very small part of your IC, integrated circuit. So you can see here. Let me, so I think it is in which one. Okay. So you can see here. So this is called via, and this is a typical metallization layer. So this is a part. This is not discrete device. This is integrated circuit. So these are the lines which are or the metallization which are used to connect different devices together, and eventually we'll get a particular application or complete circuit involving different active as well as passive devices. So this is your MOSFET. So here you can see this is a drain, this is a source, and this is a gate, and these are the wires. Now if we look into, so this is a part of your IC, like a small part of your integrated circuit. Now if you see here, we are utilizing metal, of course. So not only in this metallization layer, we are we are having this metallization over the source and drain contact as well in case of discrete devices. So which like typically metals that we are using when fabricating these integrated circuits, they are aluminum, gold, copper. So now you can see the resistivity is around 10 to the power -6 ohm centimeter. So this is the resistivity of these metals. Of course, it will be very, very low because this is a metal and it can conduct your current very easily, which has a lot of carriers, of course. So now after that, we obviously have this semiconducting part where so this is this is a drain and source. So from your electrons are flowing essentially from your source to drain, and then you are getting current. And here you have this channel. So this is your MOSFET. So polysilicon gate, and below you have this oxide, and below this you have the channel. So this channel obviously is made of semiconductor. Now after that, we also have this insulator, which is silicon dioxide. So silicon dioxide is insulator. So you can see this, the resistivity is of the order of 10 to the power 16 ohm centimeter. Now again, to encapsulate this overall this IC, we are you might have seen, like at least of the 4th year student, you might have seen in your lab again. I think in all your inside your electronic device, you might have observed this plastic, that black color plastic encapsulated device or integrated circuits. So that plastic, this is once again insulator, which has this resistivity of the order of 10 to the power 18 ohm centimeter. Now the thing that I want to note here, look at the change in the resistivity. So in terms of materials, so we are utilizing all these materials like metals, insulators, semiconductor, as well as this plastic to encapsulate your IC. Now in terms of conductivity or resistivity, there is 10 to the power 24 order of change. So there is a large change in terms of conductivity. Now what is this conductivity? How is this coming? Like what are the microscopic view of this conductivity in case of semiconductor or all this other material? That we'll try to understand. So essentially the objective of this first module of on the semiconductor electronics will be to understand qualitatively on which factors this resistivity or conductivity depends. Because see, again, if I try to correlate our this module objective with overall course objective, see, I mentioned in the last class, so we'll try to understand the terminal characteristics of our semiconductor devices. So what are the terminal characteristics? Simple, you have this voltage and current. So in case of diode, this kind of characteristics you have observed. So why this current is having this kind of behavior? Why it is not something like this or something different? So that we'll try to understand. So that current is essentially depends on your conductivity or resistivity of the material. So that resistivity or conductivity, how it is decided by different material parameter, or this resistivity and conductivity, you can certainly use your multimeter, or externally you can easily use. So, but what are the I would say fundamental reasons, like how this conductivity or resistivity is changing for different materials such as metal, semiconductor, or insulator, and how we can modulate this? Because essentially in your semiconductor, we need to modulate our conductivity, and we know that by doping or by varying the doping concentration, we can easily modulate the conductivity of our semiconductor, and that is why we are utilizing semiconductor to build our devices. So we'll try to understand how, this resistivity or this conductivity, how, so what are the different functions. So this is a, let's say conductivity is a function of few parameters x, y, z. So what are these x, y, z? That we'll try to understand in this particular module, module 1. So now this is another chart. So here once again you can see the variation in conductivity or resistivity for different material. So the material which has this resistivity from of the order of 10 to the power 7 to 10 to the power minus 2 is typically coming within this semiconductor domain, and the material which has a resistivity higher than this, so it is coming under insulator. And typically the materials which has lower resistivity, like lower than 10 to the power 3 or 10 to the power minus 3 ohm centimeter, those are called conductor. And this conductor, you know, this I think this is a 10 to the power minus 8 resistivity. So below this, if you go, we also have some type of material, those are called superconductor. So again, so that is also there. So that again, we will not discuss that superconductor as a part of this course, but it exists too. So then now now we have seen that there are different categories of material depending on the conductivity. Now, depending on the types, like you know, this the solids have these different types. So depending on the crystallinity. So depending on this crystallinity, this your solid. So again, I believe like all the semiconductor device, these are all solid state device. There is nothing liquid or gaseous semiconductor device or something that we can use to build our device. So all are solid state device. Now this solid state material, in terms of crystallinity, you can categorize them as polycrystal crystalline film, then amorphous, as well as crystalline. So now once again, so this is a small part of MOS. This is MOSFET, like you know this is your MOSFET. So the MOS part of your MOSFET. So this is a metal, oxide, and semiconductor. So this metal, you can now you can ask me, so sir, why are you calling this polysilicon as metal? Because this is actually silicon, but the crystallinity of this silicon is polycrystalline. It is not pure crystalline. That means the if you look at the crystal structure of this of silicon here, so it has these different domains. These different domains has same atomic arrangement, but the overall you will not find a single arrangement. But if in case of crystalline material, perfectly crystalline material, so you will find regular periodicity of your atom throughout the entire volume of the material. But in case of polycrystalline, you have different domains where you can find this periodicity of atoms. So now compared to this polycrystalline material as well as crystalline material, we have this amorphous material too. So in amorphous material, the atoms are not at all arranged properly. So they are scattered, like no periodicity is maintained in case of your amorphous material. But the interesting point here, it is not that you can only use crystalline material to develop overall device. Yes, it is true that to build the active device part, that means see here actually you have this source contact. So if I try to show you this here you have source, here you have drain, metallization. Now in between you have this semiconductor channel, and on this semiconductor channel you have this oxide, and then you have this metal or polysilicon. Okay, so actually this polysilicon, since this is not crystalline material where you have this regular periodicity of atom throughout the volume, so it also behaves as metal. Actually, in polysilicon, there are a lot of carriers. So again, you know, from the metal, we have like lot of carrier. That is why we say that in metal, it is like a sea of electron. There is no dearth of electrons. So lot of carriers are available. Similarly, in case of polysilicon also, you have lot of electrons available. So, but in case of crystalline silicon, it is not that you'll get your carriers easily. So this is the difference between polysilicon as well as silicon, crystalline silicon. So since it has many carrier, like a lot of carriers at room temperature, which is similar to metal behavior, that is why in place of metal, people have used this polysilicon. So now this polysilicon on top of your silicon dioxide, which is your oxide layer or insulating layer, and below you have this channel. So here you will have that. I think you know that you need to operate your MOSFET under inversion. So it will be essentially your P-type silicon when you will apply your voltage, get voltage, or that is above the threshold voltage. You will have this inversion, and electron will flow through this interface. So electron will flow through this interface or close to this interface. So now you can see, to build a device, it is not that you only need crystalline material. Yes, it is true that the electrons or the current that you will get from the this crystalline material, but to build this complete device, you need the other type of materials too. That means you need polycrystalline metal, you need amorphous oxide or insulator. Then only you can build your complete device. So I hope now this is clear to all of you. So another thing you can ask me just quickly, sir, why this crystalline? So this is the requirement. Why we need this crystalline this material to have this channel, electron channel? Of course, we'll see in detail in our that particular module. But still, just for the time being, this in research or as well as in some commercial device, people have tried to utilize this polycrystalline material, but the main problem if you use polycrystalline material is the reliability. Reliability means, so today you can get your desired performance out of your device, but after 5 years or let's say after 10 years, that same device may not give you the desired performance. So there might be some degradation. So that is termed like, this is again in very brief, it is termed as reliability. So how reliable your device is, it will be decided how it will behave after some time. Okay. So in terms of that reliability, if you make this any devices using polycrystalline material, it will suffer. So this is the problem. We'll see why this is the problem arising in the coming particular this MOSFET module. Now this is again, you know, that part of your periodic table. So here essentially, as you know, that silicon, germanium, those are elemental semiconductor, and these are group 4 material. Now apart from this group 4 material, so these are elemental semiconductor. Elemental means so silicon alone or this your germanium alone will be there in throughout your semiconductor crystal. So that is why these are elemental semiconductor. Now as I mentioned in the last class, so there are semiconductor which are made of 2 different material or 2 different type of atoms. So what are they? So these are called let's say if you mix this group 3 material with the group 5 material. So overall your objective is to complete that 8 outermost electron for a particular one atom. So then you know this aluminum, which also has this 3 outermost electron, and the phosphorus has 5 outermost electron. So again it will satisfy that 8 electron requirement. So so these are called group 3-5 material. So this 3-5 material or this compound semiconductors, these are very important considering all this emerging application, as we have seen in the last class. So these are called group 3,5 semiconductor. Again, you know, if we similarly mix group 2 material with the group 6 material, again at the same time it can complete the 8 outermost electron, and similarly it can give you this semiconductor behavior. So zinc sulfide or zinc selenide. So these are all, again, you know, this cadmium telluride or cadmium selenide. These are very good material considering the solar cell application. So these are called compound semiconductor. So these all the different the semiconductor in the semiconductor in this all compound semiconductor material, you will find 2 or 3 different type of atoms. So that is why these are called compound semiconductor. Again, another important thing regarding this compound semiconductor, I think coming slide we have this. So you can have semiconductor by mixing, let's say, in case of let's say if we have some semiconductor, let's say this gallium arsenide, because this was the next most important material after silicon, again in terms of invention also, like first this germanium, then silicon came, then around 1980 this gallium arsenide came. So this gallium arsenide, if you have some semiconductor of gallium arsenide, then all this let's say you have 100 atoms in your crystal, so the 50 atoms will be from gallium, and another 50 atom will be made from arsenic. Now you can have some semiconductor where you can have 25 atoms aluminum, 25 gallium, and 50 arsenic. That means you will have some material something like this: aluminum, gallium, arsenide. So this is called L-gas. So here we have 2 group 3 material and 1 group 5 material. So what is the advantage of this kind of material, and eventually what is the advantage of compound semiconductor? Because as I just mentioned, so here we have let's say it will be like, if it is 2,5, it is written something like that, this like aluminum suffix 0.25, gallium suffix 0.25, then arsenic. So you can increase aluminum concentration or atoms, and at the same time you can decrease gallium atoms. So that means out of this 100 atoms, you can have now 30 aluminum atom, 20 gallium atom, and 50 arsenic atom. So if you do this, the band gap of this semiconductor will change. So as you know that this band gap is the most fundamental property of your semiconductor. So that means all the other behavior will change. And what is the importance of this variation? So you can tune your material property just by changing this aluminum or gallium atom share in this crystal. So this is the main advantage of this compound semiconductor, because see, in case of silicon or this germanium like elemental semiconductor, you do not have this freedom, so that you can tune your material property. But in case of compound semiconductor, you have this opportunity. So this is another advantage of this materials. So however, this is another, like I must mention this. See, not all combinations are possible. It is not that any three material you can take and you can combine with that group 5 material and you will get the semiconductor. It is not possible. The primary reasons are, so this is lattice mismatch. So lattice mismatch, then room temperature instability. So the material itself may not be stable at room temperature. So these are all like some chemistry involved here. So then you need to like choose your material accordingly. So everything is not possible. Now, okay. So this is another important chart. So perhaps this is the starting point of all the this compound semiconductor research, I should say, because here actually this again, I will not spend much time on this slide, because like if I want to discuss this particular slide, it may take like a complete 1 or 2 class. So essentially, this is a graph between your lattice constant. Lattice constant is the atomic distance. You know, in semiconductor, in your semiconductor crystal, so the distance between two atoms is called lattice constant. Again, the unit you can see, it is of the order of angstrom, and this is the band gap or the your forbidden gap. Now here you can see, let's say the thing that I was discussing. Let's say in this case, so here you have one material, indium nitride, one compound semiconductor, gallium nitride, another compound semiconductor. Now what is there in between? So in this line, what is there? What is happening here? Or what is happening in this line? Which material you will find if you, like, let's say just where I am pointing, which material I would get in this portion of this line. So actually here we will get that ternary material. See, so that means, let's say here this is aluminum nitride, this is indium nitride. Here we will have some material which is aluminum indium nitride. So all these 3 atoms will be there in this semiconductor crystal. So again, another thing is, if we go towards this, the aluminum share will keep on increasing in this semiconductor, and indium share will keep on decreasing. Now what is happening in terms of lattice constant and the band gap? What is happening? See, this is something interesting, very, very interesting. See, the lattice constant is decreasing. If we keep on increasing aluminum and decrease indium, the lattice constant is decreasing, as well as our band gap is also increasing. What is the impact of this band gap and all everything? Now, you know that LED light emitting diode, so which is again your solid state device. So although these optoelectronics devices are not part of this E311, but still, you know, this the fundamental operation, this is a PN junction diode, your LED. Now particular LED you have seen like a lot of LED application. So now particular LED if you take, and whether it will emit green light, blue light, or which color it will emit, that will be decided by the band gap. Now here you can see, if you take this material like this particular aluminum indium nitride, and if you form a PN junction, so let's say you have aluminum indium nitride P type, again aluminum indium nitride N type, and if you can fabricate LED, so then you will get this blue color LED, blue, or this is a dark blue color close to your UV. So in this way, so how you are getting this color? So now the thing is, yeah, so if you change this atomic concentration, you can change the color emission. So you can change, you can see now this if you just increase indium portion and decrease the aluminum portion, you can also get this green color, green LED. You can get this blue LED. So now why I am discussing this part, see, actually this particular invention gave that 2014 Nobel Prize. So that you know, in physics 2014 the Nobel Prize given for the invention of blue LED. So blue LED, actually it was required to satisfy this RGB. So red, green, blue. If you mix, you will get essentially white LED. Again, see, white LED has the wide range of application, not the exact red, green, or blue. But due to this, earlier, I think this invention, it was, I think, this invention made around 1990 or 1985 by 3 Japanese scientists, Akasaki, Nakamura, and Amano. So these 2 color LED, the like red LED and green LED, it was already there, and these LED were made of essentially this material. So see, I am only discussing this nitride. So this is nitride. Why this is nitride? Because this group 5 element here is nitrogen. So this is similarly arsenide material. So group 5 is arsenide. So now this two color LED, it was there, but blue colored LED, like people were not could not achieve this blue emission, could not get any LED which can emit this blue light. Now if you cannot get this blue light emission, you cannot build your white LED. So that was the main challenge, and that is why they got this Nobel Prize due to the invention of blue LED. So now blue LED, if you want, you need to work on this indium gallium nitride. So indium gallium nitride is something here. This is indium aluminum nitride. So if you have any semiconductor here, you can get this green, or here you will get this blue color. So you can tune. Okay, so anyway, so this particular invention gave them this Nobel Prize. And another interesting thing, apart from this light emission and tune in the band gap, is the lattice constant. So in the previous slide, I mentioned that not all the combination possible due to the lattice constant. What is the importance of this? See, in this compound semiconductor, if we remember the last class, where I have shown this the steps involved to develop this compound semiconductor, we are taking some wafer, round shaped CD that I mentioned. So wafer, this is typically made of silicon, sapphire, some other material. So when we'll deposit, now after taking this silicon, we need to deposit all this compound semiconductor material. So compound semiconductor means this indium nitride, indium gallium nitride, or indium aluminum nitride. Now the lattice constant between this material, that means the atomic distance of this material, let's say in aluminum indium nitride lattice constant, that means the atomic distance between this like in case of aluminum indium nitride and the silicon should remain same. Why? Let's say two atoms are here, compound semiconductor, and this is silicon substrate. Now this atom distance should remain same ideally, but of course in this case in this kind of compound semiconductor, it is not same all the time. But why do we need this same distance? The importance is, if there is any variation, so what will happen? Let's say this atomic distance is low, like the atoms are closer. So what will happen? So the bonds, that covalent bonds, it will try to make with the below this atomic layer. So this bond will not be proper, and there might be some defect. I don't know whether you have gone through this material science for engineer, that course. So there will be lot of, yeah. So I'll be, if anyone is writing anything, just let me know, because I am on full screen. I may not be able to read your comment. So okay. So now coming to this, so due to this lattice constant difference in your crystal, there will be defect. And once your material is defectful, it will not give you reliable operation. So the overall, this device may fail. So that is why this lattice constant, similar lattice constant material is important. And this is another challenge. So that is why this lattice constant and band gap, these are two important factors. And this way we need to design our device. Okay, so now overall, as we have just seen, or we are discussing, that we are interested in current through our semiconductor. Now current, typically, let's say if we consider that this drift current, I think drift diffusion, you know this. Obviously we'll discuss these two things in detail. But if we consider the drift current, where we'll keep just apply the voltage across our device and the current will flow. Now this current essentially is a function of, like drift current is essentially a function of mainly two factors. One is the carrier concentration and another one is the velocity. So how many carriers you have in your semiconductor and how fast those carrier will move in your semiconductor with the application of electric field, that will decide the current you will get from your semiconductor. So these are all semiconducting property, remember. So like I think here do we have again this V you can write as mu E. E is the electric field, applied electric field or the voltage. So this is the external factor or user defined factor. And now the material parameter is the mobility and the carrier concentration. So that means this function you can also write in a different way like this. So the carrier concentration, how many carriers are available in your semiconductor and how easily it can move through your semiconducting material, this two factor will essentially decide your current. Now in this just as I mentioned, like we'll try to quantify this conductivity or resistivity. So we need to calculate or quantify these two functions, these two parameters. How many carriers are there and how easily this carrier can move within the semiconductor. So we'll see how to calculate all this. We'll see all this in the coming just slides. Okay, now to understand the semiconductor behavior, so till now we discussed different semiconductor behavior and the different semiconductor material from your periodic table like elemental semiconductor, compound semiconductor. Now these are, I would say, like a macroscopic observation. Like simply you can apply voltage and you will get some current and you can calculate your conductivity or resistivity of the material. So again, similarly, you can also get your band gap of the material using some characterization techniques such as UV visible technique or photoluminescence technique. So these are all microscopic view, like from outermost point of view. Like if you consider any semiconductor material, you will see this observation. Now, what is happening at the microscopic level or at the, I would say, at the nano level? So because these all the lattice constant dimension of the order of your Armstrong. So then what is exactly happening so that you are getting output or that conductivity, light emission, band gap in that way. So what are the fundamental phenomena or fundamental I would say like thing which is happening inside your semiconductor? Now to understand this phenomena at the macroscopic level or nano level, we need to take help of these three models in semiconductor. So one is the bond model. Bond model is something that you have already, so there is like you have already seen that I'll just show you. So then you know this band model. Band means that energy band, conduction band, valence band, and how this is forming in case of semiconductor or other material. And you know that depending on the difference between conduction band and the valence band, you can also name your material metal, semiconductor as well as insulator. So we'll try to understand how these bands are forming within solid state device. And finally, we'll try to look into this band structure. Again, band structure is something detailed picture of your semiconductor material. So I will not go into detail, but I'll try to show you so that it helps you to understand the other concepts. So let us begin with the bond model. So again, if you look at this model, complexity wise, these are like the most easier model to understand is bond model, then a little bit complex model is the band model, and finally this band structure. Again, if you understand this band structure properly of any your semiconductor, you can understand, like you can predict anything. So anyway, there are some type of research where people are theoretically calculating this band structure and trying to understand or trying to predict the behavior of any new semiconductor. So anyway, that is something research. Now in bond model, as you know that in typical semiconductor crystal, we have periodic arrangement of atom, and which is essentially also called lattice. Now here you can see these are all the atoms. So this is a two-dimensional representation of single lattice. So these are all atoms, and this is the distance in the two directions. So Here, you know, in lattice, semiconductor lattice, there is another concept called unit cell. Unit cell is the most primitive cell of your crystal. So if you repeat that, you will get the complete semiconductor. So that is called unit cell. So if you just keep on repeating this one particular this unit cell, then you will eventually get the full crystal structure of your device, sorry, of your material. So now this is a three-dimensional overview of your primitive unit cell, semiconductor unit cell. Now it has this typically this three constant. So this is again the lattice constant. This because essentially these are all atoms. So one atom, two atom. So the distance between two atom is the lattice constant, which is A. So again, this here, this is a generalized primitive cell as it is mentioned. So this A, B, C, this three value, like this is a distance, like just absolute value or the measurement of the distance between these two atoms here and here. So this A, B, C value, they can be same or they can be different. Like A equals to B equals to C, or it may be possible like A equals to B but not equals to C. So this is the lattice constant, and they may be same, they may be different. Depending on that, we could have a different type of crystal. So this different type of crystal means for different material we have different crystal, not only in terms of the value of this distance or the absolute value of this A, B or C, but another factor is the angle between this A, B, C, or these three vectors, I would say. So what is the angle between A and C, what is the angle between B and C, and what is the angle between your A and B? So they can be 90-degree and they may not be or greater than less than 90-degree. So depending on that also you will have different crystal or different material. So that we'll see. So this is a generalized primitive cell. Now here we have this three I would say like very basic unit cell. So first one is the simple cubic. So in simple cubic you have this 8 atoms at the 8 corner of this particular cube. So cube means that means all this angle between this A, B, C is 90-degree, and A equals to B equals to C, of course. So this is a cubic or this simple cubic crystal. And if I remember correctly, the material, you know that there is a material called polonium in your periodic table. So polonium is the only material in your periodic table which has this crystal structure. Similarly, this is another crystal, like if you just put one atom within at the center of this cube, you will get body center cubic crystal, or simply it is called BCC. So this body center cubic here also, like you have one atom at the center, unlike your simple cubic. So I think the material such as sodium as well as tungsten has this kind of crystal structure. And another crystal structure is this FCC. FCC means so take this simple cubic and then keep one atom at so this is a cube, so that means it has 6 faces. So keep one atom in all these 6 faces. That means 6 atoms on these 6 faces. So that then you will get the FCC crystal, like a face-centered cubic. So on the there is nothing at the center. So only you have the different 6 atoms on this 6 face of your cube. So then you will get this face-centered cubic. And so the material, mostly the metals, that means gold, platinum, aluminum, they have this FCC crystal. So this crystalline aluminum or crystalline gold, if you see at this atomic level, you will get this FCC crystal. Now the next query is how many nearest atoms are there for each atom. So in case of simple cubic, how many nearest atoms will be there? Like let's say this atom, how many nearest atoms are there? So because we need to understand this, again you will see in the coming slide, to decide your semiconductor property or eventually your material property. So if you take one atom in simple cubic, how many nearest atoms are here? So this, if you consider this, so 1, 2, then here will be 3, 4, and this down 5, another one, and the 6. So in case of simple cubic, one particular atom has 6 nearest atom. So because this 6 again in this probably in the coming class or the next class we'll see that this nearest atom will actually decide the overall behavior of your semiconductor, because this nearest atom will impact, or the exact word or scientific word is the part of. So this nearest atom will part of the properties of this particular atom. So that is why we are interested in this nearest atom. We are not interested in this atom when we are considering this particular atom. Okay. So so in case of simple cubic, we have 6 nearest atom for each atoms. In case of body centered, how many atoms will be there? And in case of face centered, how many atoms will be there? So these are something I am keeping you for you, so you can work out at your home and you can let me know maybe in the next class, or you can discuss this in our next doubt clearing session or tutorial session. Another important thing we need to understand from this crystal structure is the packing fraction. What is this packing fraction? So the packing fraction is, see, essentially all these atoms are from, of course, this from classical point of view, these are all sphere. Now this is overall a cube. Now cube, like sphere inside a cube, will not take the entire volume. Like if I calculate the entire volume of this cube, and then we consider that these all atoms are touching each other, so it is something like these atoms, these atoms are touching each other. So of course they cannot touch, but still, if we consider that these are all touching each other, so then what is the packing fraction means? What is the empty volume and what is the volume filled with the atoms? That is called packing fraction. So why this packing fraction is important? Because using this packing fraction, we can calculate the density of atoms. Because remember, in perhaps in the last class I mentioned, we need to understand how many atoms are there in per centimeter cube. Per centimeter cube, how many silicon atoms are there? So because if every atom donates one particular electron, so then that many electrons per centimeter cube will be available to conduct your current. So that is why this quantification is essential from this crystal concept. So that also we need to calculate. So what will be the number of atoms per centimeter cube in case of, let's say, silicon, germanium, or in case of compound semiconductors. So then we'll understand how many electrons or holes could be there in your device or in your material. So after discussing this simple cubic, BCC and FCC, this is the crystal structure which we have in case of silicon or semiconductor. Because as I mentioned earlier, like this polonium has this simple cubic, or tungsten or sodium has this BCC, and this metal has mostly this FCC. Now what is the crystal structure of your silicon or this other compound semiconductor? So more for silicon, it is the diamond lattice. So diamond lattice, what is this diamond lattice? Whether it is a FCC, BCC, or what is the simple cubic? So it is actually 2 FCC crystal, 2 face-centered cubic lattice penetrating each other. So you can see here 2 interpenetrating FCC sublattice with one sublattice displaced from other by 1/4 of the distance along the body diagonal of Q. So this is two interpenetrating FCC. So FCC you have seen earlier that when in a simple cubic, if you place 6 atoms on the 6 faces, you will get eventually FCC. Now if we have two interpenetrating FCC, and that means take one FCC this cube, then place another FCC cube. Let's say if I roughly try to again, it is difficult because it requires three-dimensional this representation. So, but still, let's say this is one FCC lattice. Now, if we just go this diagonally and place another FCC lattice, so then we will get this kind of diamond crystal. So, this diamond crystal, just remember, it is two interpenetrating FCC lattice. Now, silicon has this crystal structure. That means these are all silicon atoms. So these are all silicon atoms. And similarly, we also need to understand, so how many atoms are there in particular cube. So then we can calculate the total number of silicon atoms per centimeter cube. So if we just try to calculate, so how many atoms, silicon atoms are here? So these corner atoms actually shared by 8 cube. So because you know this, this is 1, 2, 3. So these 8 corner atoms are shared by 8 cubes. So that means 1/8 of each atom will be the part of one particular cube. Then you have this FCC. So then FCC, you know, this 6 into, because if you place one atom at the surface, so that atoms will be half shared by the particular cube and another half will be shared by the this top cube. So then eventually these 6 atoms will be like out of the 6 atoms, only 3 atoms will be within a particular cube. And finally, 4 more atoms will come due to this interpenetrating FCC structure. So eventually you will get this 1 plus 3 plus 4. So there are 8 atoms in a particular cube in case of silicon. Now, if you calculate the volume of this cube, so how to calculate the volume of the cube? You need to know the lattice constant or the atomic distance. So atomic distance of your silicon is 5.43 angstrom. So the distance between the atom is 5.43 angstrom. So then if you take this 5.43 angstrom cube, so you will get the overall volume of this cube. And then in this particular volume, you have 8 atoms. And similarly, you can calculate how many atoms will be there per centimeter cube. So this is how to calculate the atomic density. So it will come, if you do this calculation on your own, if I remember correctly, it will come around 5 into 10 to the power 22 atoms per centimeter cube. So this is the atomic density of silicon. Now similarly, as I mentioned, this gallium arsenide is another important compound semiconductor. So gallium arsenide has this crystal structure. So this is called zinc blende lattice. What is the difference between zinc blende and the diamond? Zinc blende and diamond both are same, but here, as I mentioned, that essentially your diamond lattice is a 2 interpenetrating FCC. So the another FCC lattice is made of arsenic, and one FCC lattice is made of gallium. So you can see here, these are gallium atoms and these are arsenic atoms. Because this is compound semiconductor, so the equal amount of gallium atom and arsenic atoms should be there, because this is a compound semiconductor, and 50% should be gallium atom, 50% should be arsenic atom. So it has this kind of arrangement, and this is called zinc blende lattice. Okay. So similarly, you can, I hope you can calculate the carrier density, atomic density also. Like, what is the time now? Is 56. Okay, so I'll just stop here after discussing this slide. So this is see another, okay, here another interesting point. In particular crystal there are different planes. What are the planes? Just consider, see here you have, this is a BCC crystal, BCC lattice, like in a simple cubic. At the center you have one atom. Now if we consider, let's say ABCD, this plane, this top plane, how many atoms are there? 4 atoms are there. Now at the same time, if I ask you, consider this blue color, this blue shaded this plane, that means A, C, E, F, this plane. If I ask you to consider this plane and ask you to calculate how many atoms are there, so how many atoms are there? 5 atoms are there. The 4 corner atoms, and in between at the middle you have another atom. Although this ABCD plane has 4 atoms, but this ACEF plane has 5 atoms. So now you can understand, depending on the different plane, in the crystal, it has different number of atoms. So why this is important? Because this is important when considering different device property, or growing or developing different devices. We can take different plane of your this crystal, and depending on that we can have different number of electrons. Okay, so just the previous calculation, that 5 into 10 to the power 22, these atoms are per volume. So this is atoms, this many silicons will be there per centimeter cube. Now there is also some concept called how many atoms will be there at the surface. So whenever we'll discuss any plane, so because this volume, centimeter cube, and if I ask you to calculate how many atoms will be there per centimeter square for this plane or for ABCD plane, so it will differ. So now we have, in case of this crystal, we have different convention to interpret this different plane. So it is called Miller indices. So you can name this plane. So you need to identify this plane, right? Because obviously this A, B, C, D, E, F, in this way you cannot name any particular plane of your semiconductor material. So how to name this particular plane or different planes of your crystal, that is called finding Miller indices. So what is this Miller indices? So first you need to find the intercept plane of this with the 3 Cartesian coordinate in your lattice constant. Then take the reciprocal, find the smallest integer, and then enclose in the parenthesis such as HKL. So just if I give you an example, it will be clear. So let's say this plane, this particular plane, we need to we need to find out this Miller indices of this particular plane, or essentially we need to identify this plane. How to identify this plane? So it has a cut in A, 3A and 2A. Now if we take the reciprocal of this, what will be the thing? 1, then 1 by 3 and 1 by 2. If we multiply this to get the nearest integer, 6, 2, 3, and then close it. So that means this particular plane is 6, 2, 3 plane. And if I ask you how many atoms are there, you need to we can ask you how many atoms are there in the 6, 2, 3 plane. So then you need to find out the atoms here in this plane. So this is the how to identify particular plane in your semiconductor. Okay, so these are something, some generic, these are some other convention to for this Miller indices, like how to represent different planes and all. So you can just read it, and yeah. So I'll stop here for today, and thank you. And let me know if you have any doubt, any question. We'll wait for next 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Again, for your information, I uploaded the first 2 video recording in the Moodle, as well as I have uploaded the last presentation, the slides I have uploaded in the Moodle. Please check this. Thank you. Anyone, any question? No.